Hello friends, my name is Igor Gavryshchak. Traditionally, we have a live broadcast. We will talk about the election of the President of the United States of America. Donald Trump won a week ago and there is a lot to talk about, because there are new appointments. It is with great pleasure that I introduce our regular guest. This is a political scientist from the United States of America and former head of the Azerbaijani government apparatus Ramiz Yunus. Mr. Yunus, hello. Welcome. Thank you for the invitation. Nice to see you. Greetings to all our esteemed audience. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes. I want to ask our audience to be, as always, active and like, subscribe, comment and share our conversation. Mr. Yunus, well, in fact, a week has passed since Donald Trump became the 47th president. Officially, this will take place on January 20th, at the inauguration, but the first steps, the first decisions, such as the appointment of the first National Security Advisor, Michael Waltz, have already been made. And of course, this is Marco Rubio, who should replace Blinken as Secretary of State. Do you think these appointments can already tell us something? Can they already open up the light for us on some solutions in the future? I want you, Ukrainian journalists, Ukrainian society, to approach this topic globally, systematically. If you proceed from the point of view of Ukrainian centricity, and assess whether it is beneficial to Ukraine or not, then it seems that for this you will need to take something out of context. Because, of course, the interest of Ukrainians in this event is large-scale, the release of the US president. But in any case, in order to understand it well, you need to understand why this happened, and through this prism you will understand all personnel appointments, including the direction that directly interests you. I mean the Russian-Ukrainian direction, because the approach of Donald Trump personally and all his supporters, as well as all those who are going today, these appointees, in all directions, it is clear that they were preparing for this. They have been preparing for this for the past 4 years after failing to defend Donald Trump's first term, considering it an injustice from their point of view and throwing all opportunities to Donald Trump and his supporters, as well as those who supported him in big business. You saw that there was a lot of money involved in this election, and standing on the other side, I mean both Democrats and Republicans, so there were so many issues at stake that were not just about America, but about the whole world. Many even say that it is as if some kind of color revolution took place in the United States of America. I would not call it that. I believe that this is a social order of American society, which understands that the time of crisis in which America has been for the past 30 years has come to an end, because everything has come to an impasse. And as a result of the fact that America found itself in such a situation. This is reflected in the entire globe, where they are accustomed to the leading role of the United States. And in the absence of the leading role of the United States, the world, you see, today is all reeling, the turbulence is huge, the precursor of the Third World War, and it is necessary again, as Donald Trump said, to make America great again. What meaning he put into these words? This will need to be understood, because what he meant primarily concerned the domestic theme of America, if you look at the slogans and speeches that he made throughout the election campaign. But we understand that we live in a modern world, where this policy of isolationism, which was laid down by the Founding Fathers and on which, in principle, it is based, is simply adopted. That is, conservative America, it is based on it. But it is simply impossible, based on the fact that the world today is so intertwined, even including America, intertwined with its strategic opponents to one degree or another. First of all, with China, and China, in turn, is intertwined with America's allies, and therefore it is so important that it is impossible today to isolate ourselves and not deal with this problem, because the same September 11, 2001 came from outside America, and they came as a result of wrong work in certain areas, including the Middle East. And therefore, the personnel appointment that he makes is based on the fact that, looking at this personnel appointment, you can immediately conclude that this is a systematic approach. First of all, I'll start by saying that in the first place, the main thing is that he appointed the Chief of Staff, the woman who worked under Reagan and who helped Reagan win, and then she helped Donald Trump, from his victory in Florida last term to today. This is the same person who organized all this, and her appointment to the post of Chief of Staff suggests that he does not want to repeat all the personnel mistakes that he had in his first cadence, concerning both the head of the staff and all advisors and members of the cabinet. He changed 5 defense ministers there. I am not even talking about all these heads of various ministries and departments, including his inner circle in the National Security Council. Notice, even at this surrender reception that took place between Trump and Biden, Biden was never met, on the right and left. You see, no one paid attention. Biden's chief of staff was sitting next to him, and his chief of staff was sitting next to him. That is, these are the main people who will be engaged in this method of surrender. These are the people who usually do not shine. Sullivan's boss sat next to Biden. You see, you know Sullivan, and the boss of everyone else, because this position is even more important than the vice president. After all, in principle, according to the Constitution, it replaces him. But the vice president, like Kamala Harris, yes, you can push her aside, and she may not make any decisions. And this chief of staff, this is what is important. Therefore, keep a close eye on it, but I have no doubt that it will not glow so much. Now, as for those that are equipped, that glow. And here I would start by saying that not in the way you have just voiced. There is a Secretary of State, there is a Pentagon, there is intelligence, there is a Department of Justice. I would start with that Elon Musk and Ramaswamy. Because the fact that this appointment is the creation of a new ministry, that is, a ministry that will deal with, as he said, this swamp of the majority. Because he has to change this internal diplomatic state, this entire device 180 degrees. That is, the cuts will probably be frenzied. Plus, for sure, they will be strengthened somewhere. Most likely, this is the emigration topic in the first place. Yes, there are 26,000 workers to this day. So he appointed the Department of Homeland Security appointed a woman. He appointed another person as the king of this border, who is both he and she. She once sent the National Guard to the border when she was governor. And the same person who said that the world had not yet seen such a deportation at election rallies. That is, these are the decisive people who will do this. And for this, the capabilities of these structures will certainly be strengthened. But on the other hand, this entire apparatus, which in 2016, when Trump came to power and resisted for 4 years, failed to do so. If we take Trump's first calendar like this, by and large, he did not succeed. He did not have success as such. And why? Because he was inexperienced, he was not prepared. He came like that. He thought he would take Washington with a snoo. And he thought, that's how he's going to take foreign policy. He went to China, and went to North Korea, and met with Putin. And nowhere did he achieve any success. With the exception of the transfer of the capital from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, nothing he did in foreign policy was remembered. And to say that there was no war anywhere during his reign does not mean that these wars did not exist. They did exist if he had solved these problems. It is another thing to proceed from the point of view of America that America did not deal with this, and this is good for America. So what's next? September 11th once came to us, so something else came to us. When the world is turbulent somewhere, and your strategic adversaries, such as China, Russia, North Korea and Iran, are strengthening, and they have grown stronger over the years, this is not the right approach. Therefore, in general, his first cadence, from his point of view, it was not implemented by him as he would have liked. Because neither he personally, he had any experience, and not those who supported him, who came to power, they turned out to be for the most part. These are not the people on whom he could be based. And that is why today, look, he has come. He already has tens of thousands of personnel. At first, some said that there were 16,000 of them. Today many say that there are twice as many of them, and this applies to the Pentagon, the State Department, intelligence, and key government structures that will have to implement this ideology of America Great Game, both in terms of domestic policy and foreign policy. And therefore, what Elon Musk and Ramaswamy will do, and they were given a term of 2 years, because he has a cadence of 4 years, he will not pass for a second term, because he will change the Constitution, make an amendment, and this is 2/3 of the Congress and 2/3 of the states of America. This is unrealistic in the current situation. Therefore, the success of this cadence, and then the heirs can be announced the same Vence, who will be next to him for 4 years and will continue further, in this regard. Trump's tactics are exactly this, and based on this, he begins these personnel appointments. And therefore, his personnel appointments are the first. Look, these were these topics of immigration, because I spoke in the last program, immediately after the elections, and I can repeat it today. The first topic in domestic policy will be immigration, because he came to power on it, so to speak. He won a huge advantage in this topic compared to the Democrats. And in foreign policy, this will be, of course, the topic of China. And therefore, these first appointments concern precisely this topic here internally, and foreign policy is just those people. As you will see, Secretary of State Marco Rubio. He is personam non grata, officially banned from entering the same China. China is against him for his anti-Chinese speeches, anti-Chinese, anti-Russian, anti-Cuban. That is, these were his statements when he was a senator. And China imposed sanctions on him. He is banned from entering China. Well, especially since China will have to get rid of these sanctions, because it is already the Secretary of State, there are no other options here. But again, this is the person who, mind you, is a hawk in relation to the same China. And if you add this newcomer's national security assistant here, this is the same, of course, which means that the Chinese direction will be very strong. And then he appointed ambassadors, whom he voiced. The first 2 were not voiced at the United Nations. Because of all the ambassadors, this is the number 1 ambassador. And this is not only in the United States of America, it is true in all countries. This is the case in Russia, it is so in any country, according to the hierarchy, this is how it should be usually. This ambassador is in the most important international structure, and then they mainly come from there as secretaries of state and foreign ministers in their countries. Traditionally, it looked like this, and it always has been like this. Therefore, he appointed an ambassador there, and this ambassador is also anti-Chinese and pro-Israel. After that, he appointed his personal friend and friend Benjamin Netanyahu Jacobi as ambassador to Israel as his old ambassador. This means that he did this after China. The most important topic for him will be the Israeli theme, the Middle East theme. And yes, this Jacobi, the one who is anti-Iranian, yes, in this regard. In other words, it was he who showed the priorities in foreign policy, the priorities in domestic policy. And you proceed from this point of view to consider these personnel appointments. As for the Ukrainian topic, there is not a single personnel appointment yet. No personnel appointments who could speculate there in Moscow and could speculate in the same Kiev. Why? For that simple reason, this is not a priority for him, and secondly, he understands that this is the most difficult direction. With China, it is clear, China is its adversary, it is in the national security doctrine. And here is what he should do. Russia in the doctrine of national security as an adversary, and Ukraine in the doctrine of national security is not Israel, that is, as a strategic partner of the United States of America, outside NATO. That is, it is not a member of NATO, it is not a member of the European Union, it is not a strategic partner of the United States of America, but not by any legal documents alone. And in words, what they say is blah blah blah. This is simply in order to use this or that country in defiance of the same Russia. As, for example, they planned to use the same Russia in spite of the same China. When they were especially creating, remember, this very NATO-Russia summit. Now Russia has been removed from there. Now the NATO-Ukraine summit. And what, was Russia in NATO? No, Russia was simply used in defiance of China, and just as the G7 was the G8, in the same way in defiance of China. Therefore, both your topic and the Russian-Ukrainian topic will be considered in the US-China-Russia triangle, and there are no personnel appointments on this topic yet. Because from the fact that the Secretary of State has yet been appointed, these are just all these people whom he appoints, these are all representatives of the MAG, to one extent or another, who in 2016, perhaps, many of them did not even support Yulia. And they, quite a few, spoke unflatteringly about the same Donald Trump. Well, that's politics, and especially in America, that's okay, right? Therefore, even Donald Trump at a meeting with the same Biden, if you remember, he said so. Yes, politics is a very nimble thing, sometimes you have to bring the state to fruition, because the whole society thinks that they're enemies, and they will shoot now. You see, America has once again proved that what Donald Trump did not do 4 years ago, Biden stepped over, and he did it in order to consolidate American society as well. Therefore, what America is facing today, and this crisis that has engulfed America and the whole world today, first of all, speaks of the fiasco of the liberal agenda, which was pushed mainly here in the United States by the Democratic Party and especially its left wing, and by all those who supported this agenda in the collective West, in Europe and in NATO. And this suggests that the right-wing agenda has one, which requires reforms, which requires traditional approaches, which opposes the climate, which opposes globalization, which requires traditional methods of sovereignty and separate national entities. That is, not supranational, like the European Union, like NATO, but direct bilateral relations. Therefore, one of the bells of this in Europe, so to speak, was Brexit, when the UK withdrew from there. And this is to this day, and it cost the UK a lot of money. If you remember, then they paid 50 billion in compensation there. But the UK went for it, and today, you see, it's autonomous. And the fact that there will be crises, and everything that will affect Brussels and all EU countries, will not affect the UK in any way. The UK is in this institution only in NATO, and NATO is also the same United States of America. I want none of you to be deceived. Why do they say that the first army is the United States, the second is Turkey, and no one names the third and fourth? Because the first US Army is more than 2 million soldiers, nuclear weapons and bases all over the ball. In second place is Turkey, a 1 million-strong army, and in third place is France. She has 200,000. The UK has 75 or 80,000, and others do not have this army at all. And so when someone demands a security guarantee, you first have to understand these things. And therefore, when someone always asked me about security guarantees, I told him that only permanent members of the Security Council can give security guarantees for Ukraine. China and Russia will not give you this, as is clear. So the three of them stayed here. The United States, the United Kingdom, and France. I immediately dismiss France, because the army is not at the same level. And there, the political establishment is very much tied to the same Russia. Historically, this has been the case, plus the policies of French presidents who are to blame for what is happening in the Soviet space, and in 2008, and 2014, and today. It all traditionally came from there. This is Sarkozy, this is Hollande, this is Macron, this is what they continue. Gerhard Schröder, Angela Merkel, Riskholz, the same. Thank God, he was thrown out of the post of Chancellor 2 or 3 months later. God grants that someone will come there, the leader of the opposition, especially the one who is more or less pro-Ukrainian. That is, he understands the importance of this territory, this geography, the significance of what is happening in the world today. And your guarantor of security, from my point of view, it can be Europe, it can even be the UK. If they come to an agreement with the United States of America. If the United States of America solves this triangle, Russia, China, in this regard. Some proposals will be made to the same Russia. If the triangle is still different, if the triangle is the United States, the European Union, China. Because China, first of all, when all these trade wars begin, about which there is a lot of talk today, this will first also be decided here, depending on the decision of this triangle, a triangle with Russia will work. And Elon Musk, half of whose business today is in China, do you really think that he is interested in trade wars, and not only a cold face, but also a hot face? This means that there will be an attempt to make deals in the first place. There will be a deal, an attempt has been made, with Iran, with China, with Europe, with Russia. This is the approach he will have. And therefore, these personnel appointments that are underway, you proceed from this prism. And it is in this context that you consider what you can expect, all the options that you may have, to expect you in this topic. That is, nothing will be done behind your back, definitely. Because they understand that the current situation of this war, it suggests that Ukraine should be present in these negotiations. But in order for these talks to begin, first, I think, the most important thing will be the meeting between Trump and Xi. And it is no coincidence that in 2 to 3 days Biden should meet with Xi. I don't know what they will talk about, and I don't know what Biden talked about with Trump for 2 hours. But they probably discussed these topics as well, because the level of classified information that Biden possessed was obliged by the Constitution to transfer it to the same Trump, so that he was still guided by his own interests. Yes, and not only in personnel appointments, but also in some general interests that have been developed by the current administration from the point of view of America's national policy, yes, the strategy of the same America. You can adjust it or something, but there are things, just the Chinese direction, it seems to be for both the Biden administration and Trump, it seems, yes, it was, anti-Chinese, so they should look at these developments and all this information, so prepare the same Trump. Trump can strengthen his options, and the same Elon Musk will certainly take an active part in this issue, because he was introduced there for a reason, he will deal with the apparatus for a reason, and for a reason, Because, as I understand it, Trump is primarily interested in business. He is a businessman, but he must understand this phrase. What are we doing in Ukraine? He must understand what his interest is, why we must defend Europe, why are they not spending money on NATO. Today, 23 countries spend more than 2% of GDP on this. Again, this is not enough. If you want an American umbrella, pay. So, I can supply you with weapons, I can supply you with a lot of things, gas, everything else. You have to buy from me. So, if you need weapons in order to become stronger, I mean Europe, then you have to spend money on my military industrial kit. It means that America wants to make money on everything. It's the same with China. If you want to have my American market, then let's make it profitable for America. And your cheap one comes here and puts pressure on American production. So he says, I will increase the tariffs. He says exactly the same words in relation to the European Union. Therefore, depending on what kind of deal he will have with China, with the European Union, with the same Russia, then it will be possible to consider your topic too. But I can definitely say that without giving a security guarantee to Ukraine, he will not be able to solve the Russian-Ukrainian case, because the key issue of resolving the Russian-Ukrainian case is the issue of security guarantees. Because I cannot imagine that he can go to the defeat of Ukraine, because the defeat of Ukraine is a blow to the prestige of the United States, it is a blow to the prestige of NATO, it is a blow to the prestige of the European Union, it is the collapse of the entire Western coalition. China, as well as Russia and all the others who today do not want the return of American hegemony on the planet, will play perfectly on this. So I don't think he doesn't understand it. And what he said in the pre-election rhetoric of, leave everything behind, let's see what will happen, he says, real politics and his first steps. Personnel appointments indicate that these are the areas that are important to him. But this does not mean that Iran will immediately start bombing tomorrow. No, and Netanyahu is glad that he came. And there he has Netanyahu, and then what? Iran is not Afghanistan, the situation there is completely different. If you want to change the microclimate in Iran itself or achieve a policy that would be beneficial to Israel and the United States of America, then it is necessary to offer some kind of deal to Iran. Moreover, Iran has been actively trying to find ways to interact with the Americans for a whole year. It was not possible to reach agreements with the Biden administration. It is quite possible to agree with him, because he does not want to start any wars, as he himself said. It means that he wants to make a deal. And what deal? This means that the price of the issue is at play, both for China, for Russia, for Iran, for Europe and for everyone in this, as well as for Ukraine as well. The price of the issue of Ukraine, from my point of view, is a guarantee of security. A security guarantee, it can be either within the framework of NATO, or within the framework of what Israel, South Korea, Japan have. I am inclined to the second option, because I do not trust NATO, because NATO is again the United States of America. Without the United States of America, NATO does not exist. Notice that they are all afraid in Europe, afraid that the Americans will remove their umbrellas from there. This means that they do not represent anything in themselves. If they cannot defend themselves, how can they protect you, Ukrainians? How can they protect Georgia or Moldova, promising that you will come someday? That's why they don't accept you. Because they feed on the United States of America and are under this umbrella, and so they are not sure. Why do they need personal freeloaders? That's how they reason. That's why they hang noodles on you, then they give you up for distribution, and behind your back, these corrupt democracies come to negotiate with the same corrupt autocracies, right? And Israel, South Korea, Japan are a clear example. Because the administration has changed, and there are a lot of people here who spoke a lot of anti-Ukrainian things during the election campaign, don't let that bother you. Change the ambassador, send your special representative there, the same one who, perhaps, the Americans will appoint. Revive and work with this administration as you did with the previous administration. And work closely, you know. You need to understand what their interest is. What is their interest, when does he ask, and what do we do there? You have to make sure that they have some interest there. If there is this interest, then there will be this understanding. And this administration's approach is not limited to China, Iran, or the European Union. This applies to the whole world. That is, he is this type of person, yes, and he brings this type of people to power. And leave aside this talk about international law, about what it is about. In real politics, it doesn't work today, because it should work at the United Nations. The United Nations today does not solve any issues, it is not present in this topic. Only these strong countries decide, and these strong countries lived by the old rules. There are no new rules yet. But now they have realized that they need to make these new rules. And in order to make these new rules, we need to stop this war. How it will be, according to what rules, and who, for example, will divide this world. Unequivocally, Russia wants the Americans, like Yalta, yes, the president of Russia says, to do with me. In order to do Yalta to you, I mean Russia, yes, Russia must definitely be the second country on the planet. The second country on the planet today is China. Therefore, if the Americans divide, they will share it with the Chinese, and Russia will be in the wake of China. Yes, therefore, first of all, we need to pay attention to how the interaction will develop. This attack on China by Trump and his appointments once again show that this is what is important for him, and everything else will remain in the waiting stage. Biden will give you all this money by the end of the year, you will receive weapons, and the war will continue. Just behind the scenes there will be behind the scenes work. Try to be active in this work. Mr. Yunus, you have very well emphasized that the doctrine of the United States of America includes China as an enemy and Russia as an enemy. There is no Ukraine and there is Iran. And you also remembered that Elon Musk has a lot of investment, a lot of business in China, and yet the United States and China will negotiate. This will also probably happen with Iran and also with Russia. Can Ukraine become partially bargaining chips in order to appease or somehow negotiate with China, Russia or Iran? You know, if security guarantees are provided, namely security guarantees such as Israel, South Korea or Japan, in this situation the term small coins does not apply here. Small coins can be used only when security guarantees, real security guarantees, are not given. That is, the security guarantee is the preservation of the state sovereignty of Ukraine. And if something else, as long as there is a ceasefire, it is the territory of Ukraine. And at the moment, this territory of Ukraine has not yet returned to the same Ukraine. But the United States, being your strategic partner, mind you, has a position with Israel. Israel, in addition to becoming stronger, is getting stronger. And look where Israel is today, and how the United States defends the same Israel. Therefore, it all depends on who your security guarantor is. If it is the guarantor of the security of the United States of America or the United Kingdom, one of these two countries, then this is a serious conversation. And if something else, not at this level, then it's a bargaining chip. And I don't think it will be so easy to drag life through either. And what about you, Ukraine in 2014? I don't think. Because, you know, the most important thing is that when you listen to these conversations, you must continue to tell the whole world that nothing is possible without us behind our backs. Because you can agree on a lot of things, we do not agree with this. What are we going to do? Throw a nuclear bomb at Ukraine? Ukraine is no longer afraid of it, as I understand it. Therefore, depending on how confidently you stand on your feet, on the ground, for which I always cite the example of my native Azerbaijan, your situation is better than ours. Much better, because you have many more allies. And you have geography. See where you are. And in America, for example, you have a huge amount of support. Both in society and in the establishment. And we had absolutely none of this. And in spite of that, moreover, they did not want us. We've proven that you don't want to. We went against their opinion. And we, at the level at which we are, have managed to dismantle this ship of ours. And they managed to neutralize the United States of America, France, and Russia and Iran. And they were all against us, and we had so many allies. The same Turkey, the same Pakistan and the same Israel. That's all, there is no one else. And look who you have in huge numbers. It's just that when someone speaks, and you ask me now, behind our backs or there, and will you agree to this? I don't think that President Zelenskyy, General Syrskyi, General Zaluzny and all these soldiers who are fighting today, will they agree to this? I do not think that if something like this is proposed, if someone on Bankover agrees to this, you will simply have a revolution in the country.
Glory to Ukraine, to the defense forces. My name is Fakhruddin Sharafmal. On the line with me is Andriy Vihirinsky, a legal analyst with whom we are going to discuss. Andriy, it's good to see you. It is impossible not to discuss positive topics here. To be more precise, the clarification was as follows. To begin with, the European Union, and I learned this only yesterday, which surprised me, for the first time in history, approved the support of joint defense procurement by its member states. This refers to plans to purchase missiles and ammunition, some of which will be shipped to Ukraine. This is a short-term project, planned for 2025, but it's significant because the European Union has finally done what it was meant to do from the start. Could this mechanism, which has worked so far, potentially replace American aid in unforeseen situations? For the first time it's being used, and theoretically, it could become a permanent tool. It should become a practice for the European Union, since the EU does not have its own armed forces.
Збройні сили кожної окремої країни, так само, як і збройні сили кожної окремої країни, там, члени НАТО. Але враховуючи те, що країни не так, щоб завжди чи часто поспішали виконувати свої зобов'язання по НАТО, пов'язані із закупівлями там...
Each country has its own, and there is also NATO. But given that countries do not always quickly fulfill their obligations to spend 2% of GDP on defense, competition between customers at the country level becomes a problem. For example, Germany can buy equipment from the US, France can produce it, Spain can buy something. But small countries, especially those on the eastern flank, are at the back of the line because they have smaller procurement volumes and fewer financial resources. When we talk about joint procurement, it means the formation of a large order for a long period of time with systemic financing and predictable demand for the manufacturer, which allows it to increase capacity. Joint procurement is actually a prerequisite for strengthening the European Union's military capabilities. Macron once even said that we need to form the European Union's own armed forces. Own armed forces, in addition to the contingent, synchronized command, and so on, also include common means used in combat operations, as well as a common procurement policy. This will make it possible to distribute various equipment within the framework of the procurement, taking into account the needs and priorities, in particular, to countries that cannot afford it. For example, the Baltic states can be strengthened, especially since infrastructure projects are being actively built there to quickly deploy troops from south to north. And this applies not only to railroads, but also to road connections. This is linked to the formation of NATO's Eastern Bloc, exercises focused on logistics and rapid troop deployment, reducing delays to months. Infrastructure is being expanded, and the next step is deciding on a permanent military contingent, which could potentially replace U.S. military personnel at EU bases.
Подальшому наступний крок – це повинно бути прийняття рішення, напевно, про постійний якийсь військовий контингент, який може теоретично замінити...
This is already happening before our eyes. The processes announced for next year are related to a possible reduction in U.S. involvement in the defense of Europe, while maintaining, for example, nuclear deterrence. However, U.S. personnel and troops will gradually disperse or return home. Therefore, the EU is acting proactively. This joint procurement is likely to be financed through EU funds, rather than by each country separately. A separate budget will be created, replenished annually if successful. Some equipment, including missiles, may be transferred to Ukraine, but this will be a small portion of the overall procurement. The focus is on gradual production and capacity improvements, not just aiding Ukraine. The past 3 years of war show that the main trend is deinstitutionalizing the process, with Ramstein becoming a forum for countries to agree on who supplies what, rather than joint purchases.
Вигляді обладнання. Можливо. Але знову ж таки в рамках тих фондів, які для нас передбачені на наступний рік. Не більше, не менше. Ось, тому це в першу чергу
The formalization of the process under a single procurement is an attempt to structure mutual understanding between business and bureaucracy, where producers receive long-term contracts. They know how much product they need to produce over a certain period and to whom they need to deliver it. One single country would not be able to afford such an order. It could only order 10 tanks at a time and then wait for the next contract. If successful, this could strengthen European security and aid Ukraine. However, it may face challenges, as countries like Germany may contribute more, while others like Hungary or Slovakia might be less active due to political or financial reasons, potentially causing controversy over unequal contributions.
Такі доволі хиткі кроки до певної військової самостійності і спроможності Європейського Союзу. Але, знову ж таки, це не закупівлі повністю і виключно для нас.
Even though there are quotas, there may still be politicians who oppose it, and then the initiative may stall. But this is also part of the normal practice of pluralism in the EU, where there is not always a consensus on every initiative.
Люди збираються, вони ж не проводять спільні закупівлі, вони розподіляють зобов'язання між країнами-партнерами. Тобто, ці поставляють це, а ми просто узгоджуємо позицію, коли хто що надає.
Because in procurement matters we see that the whole trend over the 3 years of war has been to try to deinstitutionalize it. Because Ramstein is actually a club of interests or a club that is informal. People get together, they don't make joint purchases, they distribute obligations between partner countries. So these supply this, these supply that, and we just coordinate the position when someone supplies something.
Сторона підписана департаментом Єврокомісії. Окей, кому відвантажуєте? В департамент Єврокомісії. Тобто для виробника це ідеальний варіант. В нього велике замовлення, період 10 років, він розуміє, який обсяг інвестицій в виробництво він має вкласти, він розуміє, яку кількість має виробити в який рік, куди відвантажити, куди віддати. Фінансування забезпечено. Одна окрема країна, вона би не змогла собі дозволити таке замовлення. Вона б не могла собі дозволити купити 10 танків, да? Але це одноразове замовлення. А далі виробник сидить і чекає, прийде наступне чи не прийде. Тому в цій частині, мені здається, це
In Ukraine, yes, from what it can supply, but formalizing the process for a single procurement is more about structuring mutual understanding between business and bureaucracy, where business knows that it can definitely count on a long-term contract. Let's say the next procurement will supply a certain number of tanks over 10 years.
То це хороша практика. Питання тільки в тому, чи матиме вона шанс на існування, зважаючи на те, що, наприклад,
With whom do you have a relationship? With a certain, well, conditionally signed party by the European Commission department. Okay? To whom do you ship the depot? That is, for a manufacturer, this is an ideal option. He has a large order, a period of 10 years. He understands how much investment he has to make. He understands how much he has to produce, in what year, where to ship, where to give. Financing is provided. One separate country? It would not be able to afford such an order. It would be able to afford to buy 10 tanks there. Yes, but this is a one-time order, and then the manufacturer sits and waits for the next one to come or not. So in this part, I think it's
нормальна практика плюралізму. Тобто у нас є хибне упереджене таке переконання в тому, що от пропонується якась ініціатива, про яку ми читаємо в ЗМІ, да? І от вона консолідована. От всі прям
Everyone agreed to it 100%. First of all, before the press reports about it, it is already being discussed. That is, before the project is implemented and contracts are signed, the discussion is already taking place. At what level does this discussion take place? At the level of the European Union's common budget. The common budget contains quotas that each country contributes, And the security sector is one of the structural elements of this budget. Countries like Germany can buy more, but the structure of the EU budget is not homogeneous. There are subsidized countries that receive more than they pay, and there are countries that pay more than they receive. Countries on the eastern flank, part of equalization programs, may receive back more than they contribute. If they spend a portion of their contribution on other areas, it would be hard for them to complain, given that they benefit significantly from investments in agriculture and infrastructure.
Допустим, 100 мільйонів євро, назад до них вертається мільярд. Тобто в цій частині, їм жалітися на те, що з тих 100 мільйонів, які вони перерахували, потратили, допустимо...
There is no need to engage in such rhetoric, because we are not taking away from you, but giving you. Therefore, even if such thoughts are expressed, this is a normal political process in which positions are coordinated. If, for example, Orban says, "No, I don't want to, I won't, I'll vote against it," he will be told, "Okay, you'll vote against it, but you'll weaken the defense capability of the European Union." That's because we were planning to pass something on to you, so that you would also have something in reserve. Therefore, having different opinions implies the ability to communicate and agree on positions. And when people come out and say that they have already signed a contract, it means that agreement has taken place.
Скажімо, наявність інших думок, вона передбачає здатність до комунікації,
This coordination is part of the EU's medium-term budget, growing annually over 3 to 5 years. It's already aligned with positions from leaders like Orban and Fitz, so I see no major issues. The real challenges lie in financial decisions, such as voting on aid packages or extending sanctions.
І це вже є частина політики, яка пройшла через сито позиції Орбана, Фіцо і всіх решта. Тому я не бачу тут, власне кажучи, проблем.
As for arms procurement, this is still the domain of the European Commission, a supranational body that was created and part of Ukraine's sovereignty was transferred when it joined the EU. Foreign policy decision-making is another matter. It is distributed among different areas of competence. Joint procurement is the EU's internal policy. Sanctions and aid are external. Domestic policy requires a different voting procedure, a majority, while foreign policy requires absolute voting. Therefore, these systems of checks and balances cannot be called direct counterbalances, but they facilitate the decision-making process in domestic policy, making it more flexible than in foreign policy.
Це питання зовнішньої політики. Внутрішня політика потребує іншого порядку голосування більшістю. Зовнішня політика – абсолютним голосуванням.
If the same veto power was available in domestic policy matters, some EU directives would not exist, and this would lead to constant squabbling without decision-making. This mechanism is already working, and even if politicians may say that we don't want lower pensions or fewer social subsidies, these processes are already happening.
То я думаю, що частина директив Європейського Союзу в принципі не існувала. А по-друге, це було би просто постійні чвари без прийняття рішень.
So in general, there are no particular problems.
Тому цим механізмом вже підкорюються. Попри те, що політично можуть озвучувати, що ой, ми не хочемо, щоб пенсії були менші, чи соціальні дотації нам, чи дотації на вирівнювання регіонів були менші. Да, ми стурбовані. Але воно вже і так відбувається. Тому тут плюс-мінус особливих проблем немає.